Now, with the recent Mueller indictment against the creators of certain Russian troll farms with the goal of meddling in America's elections, a lot of people are shocked and horrified that a country could dare to try to influence another country's democratic process. Wait until they find out who the biggest election meddler actually is. According to intelligence veterans and scholars who have studied covert operations, turns out the horrible attack on American democracy by the Russians is actually no different than what America has been known all over the world for doing. Ah, interesting. Now, this is an opinion piece in the New York Times. It's excellent. They talked to Stephen L. Hall, right? Different intelligence experts and other scholars on this issue. They asked him about, okay, look, did America influence and meddle in other people's elections? Again, the answer is yes. In fact, Stephen L. Hall retired in 2015 after 30 years at the CIA, so he was a CRA veteran, and he was the chief of Russian operations, so he might actually know a bit about this. He said, if you ask an intelligence officer, did the Russians break rules or do something bizarre? The answer is no, not at all. The United States absolutely has carried out such election influence operations historically. And he added, I hope we keep doing it. So understand, this is a CIA guy, career CIA guy, saying, yeah, you know what the Russians did is pretty normal, interfering in our elections, because we do it too. And I hope we keep doing it, because apparently that's what the CIA wants to do, is meddle in other elections. So much for being shocked and chagrined, right? See, here's the thing. That's just the media narrative, right? It's the media narrative, and it's the Democratic establishment trying to blame their loss, an incredibly embarrassing loss, on Russian trolls and their army of memes, when in reality, the Clinton campaign was poorly run. They didn't campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin. That's not Russia's fault. They had an incredible amount of hubris. The fact that, no, we can't lose to this guy. Nobody can lose to this guy. Well, you did. And again, it's partly due to terrible election consultants that are overpaid. They get paid whatever if they win or not. And a candidate that was, of course, incredibly unpopular and distrusted and disliked for many legitimate and some not so legitimate reasons. So now we have another expert. Now, this is Locke Johnson. Now, he's the Dean of American Intelligence Scholars. Now, his opinion on Russia is much the same. He said that Russia's 2016 operation was simply the cyber age version of a standard United States practice for decades, whenever American officials were worried about the results of a foreign vote. He said, quote, "We've been doing this kind of thing since the CIA was created in 1947. We used posters, pamphlets, mailers, banners, you name it. We've planted false information in foreign newspapers. We've used what the British call King George's cavalry, which is another name for suitcases full of cash." Not only that, but in the 1950s, the CIA used other methods, which would include overthrowing elected leaders in both Iran and Guatemala, and backing violent coups in other South American countries back in the 1960s. It also plotted political assassinations and supported brutal anti-communist governments in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So, look, you want to think that Russia is bad. What they did in the 2016 election with troll farms and memes? Look at what we've done. We've overthrown entire governments. Now, these guys, of course, Mr. Hall and Mr. Johnson say, well, no, look, yeah, we used to be terrible, but now, I mean, you can't even make a comparison because we are doing it in the case of freedom. Interesting. He says, American interventions have generally been aimed at helping non-authoritarian candidates challenge dictators or otherwise promoting democracy. Russia has more often intervened to disrupt democracy or promote authoritarian rule. But there's a little bit of a problem with that argument and something that I disagree with. Look at our track record, right? Well, look at Libya, for example. Libya, we were like, oh, we've got to overthrow the dictator Gaddafi and do some more and actually introduce some democracy. Well, guess what happened? We actually made the country worse by doing so. We also overthrew the government of Iraq. So here you have a brutal dictator, Saddam Hussein. Now, yes, part of it was promoting democracy. The other part was, 9/11, 9/11, which they didn't actually attack us in 9/11. They had nothing to do with 9/11. So it quickly changed from weapons of mass destruction, 9/11, to we're promoting democracy and freedom. But when we did that, we created something far worse. ISIS. So, look, if you want to tell me that we're better than the Russians because we're trying to promote democracy, I'm not buying it because, again, look at our track record. Look at the real reasons we actually do things. Iraq was about oil. Libya, probably also about oil. It's funny how that works. Syria, now you could say that, and there's a narrative about it being about natural gas or a pipeline. I'm sure that actually does play into it, but I think it actually goes more into complex military alliances and sectarian conflicts. So that one's a bit more involved. Not only that, but climate change actually played a role in the conflict in Syria as well. But that's not why we got involved. We didn't get involved by saying, by worrying about, oh my God, look at these poor people suffering from the effects of climate change. No, we're like, Russians are involved. And also, we've got different alliances in this area. We don't like Bashar al-Assad. So, we'll figure something out. So, nonetheless, the whole point is, when American interests are at stake, we're more than happy to remove leaders for our own benefit and sell it as spreading democracy or humanitarian rights or all that stuff. So, that's what these guys, Mr. Hull and Mr. Johnson, are arguing. Again, I don't agree with that. Now, we've done this more than the Russians. Now, the Russians, to be fair, they're trying to step up their game. They're like, oh yeah? Yep, we can meddle in the elections too. So that's what we're going to try and do. Now, a Carnegie Mellon scholar, Don H. Levin, he actually looked at the records, right, for both overt and covert election influence operations. What he found is that the United States had perpetuated 81 covert and overt election interference operations. So that's how many we've conducted. The Soviet Union and Russia, between 1946 and 2000, actually did about 36. So 81 to 36. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't more. Russia could have done more. The United States could have been more. Those are just the ones that we actually know of. Now, Mr. Levin said, quote, I'm not in any way justifying what the Russians did in 2016. It was completely wrong of Vladimir Putin to interfere in this way. That said, the methods they used in this election were the digital version of methods used by the United States and Russia for decades, breaking into party headquarters, recruiting secretaries, placing informants in a party, giving information or disinformation to newspapers. So again, you can not downplay what Russia has done. And I don't want to downplay that. No, Vladimir Putin is a brutal dictator, and the government of Russia is hyper-capitalist. They're not some left-wing utopia, okay? No, they're hard right-wingers. They imprison journalists, and a lot of Putin's opponents mysteriously end up dead. That said, America has also done terrible things, okay? So the methods, by the way, those are important here, right? Now, the methods involve sometimes willing participants as well as non-willing participants, okay? So that's important, especially in the context of the Mueller investigation and what they have so far found, that there are some people that were unwilling participants in these efforts. But there's more. Back in the 1940s and 50s, the United States used to send assistance to non-communist candidates in other countries. Now, Mark Wyatt, former CIA officer in a 1996 interview, admitted that, quote, we had bags of money that were delivered to selected politicians to defray their expenses. Sending money to foreign politicians, that's election meddling. And look, it probably goes further because that money was probably used for ads. So disinformation or information ads. Okay. But there are more covert methods that they actually use other than just sending money. Richard M. Bissell Jr., who ran the agency's operation in the late 1950s and early 1960s, wrote in his autobiography of, quote, exercising control over a newspaper or broadcasting station, or of securing the desired outcome of an election. This self-congratulatory declassified report on the CIA's work in Chile in 1964 election boasts of the hard work the agency did supplying large sums to its favored candidate and portraying him as a wise, sincere, and high-minded statesman, while also painting his leftist opponent as a calculating schemer. Apparently that seems to have been effective. CIA officials also told Mr. Johnson in the late 1980s that insertions or information into foreign news media, mostly accurate but sometimes false, were running at 70 to 80 a day. In the 1990 election in Nicaragua, the CIA planted stories about corruption in the Sandinista government, and of course the opposition ended up winning. So, interesting. So that's a lot of what we did, but that's not just the CIA, though. The Department of State and its affiliates have also meddled in other elections. For example, in the 2000 election of Serbia, the United States funded a successful effort to defeat Slobodan Milosevic. Now, that guy is a horrible leader, he's a nationalist, and what they did, or what we did, I should say, is that we provided political consultants and also millions of stickers with the opposition's clenched fist symbol, and he's finished in Serbian printed on 80 tons of adhesive paper and delivered by a Washington contractor. So, Vince Houghton served in the military in the Balkans at the time and worked closely with intelligence, said he saw the American efforts everywhere. Quote, we made it very clear that we had no intention of letting Milosevic stay in power. So, look, again, that's clear election meddling, right? Was it effective? I'm not exactly sure. And I don't agree with any sort of meddling. I don't agree with Russian meddling. I don't agree with the United States meddling in other people's elections, but there's no question that we do it. We all do it. Every country does it because they want something. Now, here's more examples. Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is after we invaded. We still try to control the country. For example, after Hamid Karzai was reelected as president of Afghanistan in 2009, he complained to Robert Gates, then the Secretary of Defense, about the U.S. attempt to defeat him, which Mr. Gates calls in his memoir, quote, our clumsy and failed push. Not only that, but it turns out we have meddled in Russian elections. Oh dear God, no. American fears that Boris Yeltsin would be defeated for re-election as president in 1996 by an old-fashioned communist led to an overt and covert effort to help him, urged on by President Bill Clinton. This included an American push for $10 billion in International Monetary Fund loan to Russia 4 months before the voting, and a team of American political consultants. So we helped Russian candidate Boris Yeltsin win his campaign against communists. That's super blatant. We helped the campaign against the communists. So, yes, we have done this. There's a quote here from Thomas Carruthers. Now, he's a scholar at the Carnegie Institute for International Peace. Now, he recalls, during this operation, that some people were very uncomfortable with it. One State Department official told him, quote, Yeltsin is democracy in Russia. To which Mr. Carruthers said he replied, that's not what democracy means. Meddling in an election, giving money to a preferred candidate, and you want to talk about democracy, right? Well, you have already interfered in their democratic process. The same thing that we accuse Russia of doing today, which I actually do believe that they have done. So yes, we've meddled in elections. Sometimes it's justified, well, they justify it as trying to do the right thing, right? Now, others, of course, the vast majority, I believe, in my opinion, cannot be justified because it was an effort to maintain or either to get access to resources or to have some sort of strategic military advantage for the United States of America. That, I think, is what the Russians were ultimately trying to do in 2016. They were trying to get some sort of advantage. Wouldn't that make sense? yes, get a friendly leadership in place so that maybe we can get something from them or make it easier to get something from them. It's no secret that President Trump has done business deals privately with Russia. Legitimate business deals, sure. For example, various plans for hotels, and of course, doing the Miss Universe pageant in Russia. So, of course, yes, deals. And that's what Donald Trump was doing when he was a private citizen. He was doing business deals, and sometimes he did deals with other countries, Russia, Saudi Arabia also, which, of course, Saudi Arabia now gets preferential treatment as well from the Trump campaign or from the Trump administration. So you have those deals. You have deals now with Russian billionaires going and buying up real estate from Trump really cheap. Now, that, of course, could be possible money laundering, but we don't know the specifics there. So I think, based on those past deals, hey, man, look, I think, to me, it seems obvious that he is someone, at the very least, who would be open to making deals to benefit Russia. Because, look, he loves making deals, right? He wants to make deals. If Russia comes to him with a deal about, for example, pipelines or fossil fuels or whatever, or working together in Syria, absolutely. I love making deals, right? Everybody loves it when I make deals. I make the best deals. There doesn't have to be collusion for you to see that. There couldn't be collusion, or there might not be collusion. There might not be any secret deals. I'm not saying there isn't, but I'm not saying 100% that there is either. Personally, I do think there is, but I can't prove it. But there doesn't have to be any of these secret deals for Trump to be willing to make deals with Russia. Because, again, he likes making deals, and generally he has a more friendly sort of demeanor towards Russia himself. For example, he doesn't want to do sanctions put on Russia because he doesn't believe, again, in this election meddling narrative. And also, there is, again, some thoughts that he may have had some deals, but again, I don't know for sure. But Trump, as I said, is seen as more of a friendly sort of face towards Russia. Hillary Clinton, not so friendly. Now, here's another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, right? So Hillary Clinton, one of the problems that progressives had with her is that she pushed fracking all over the world. And that's obviously a huge, huge problem. Now, she tried to push it in places like Europe. Now, why? Well, number one, obviously because of the money. Follow the money, right? But you also got to look at geopolitical stuff, right? American gas companies actually wanted to cut in on Russia's natural gas business. So Russia was supplying Europe. Now, our companies wanted in. Our companies want in, they're going to take the competition from Russian companies. Now, of course, Hillary also had other reasons to despise Russia, of course. So it seems like it would be in their best interest to not get Hillary elected. So what are they going to do? They're going to derail Hillary and get somebody that they can deal with. And look, originally before the Russian sanctions, ExxonMobil wanted to push a $500 million, I think it's either a $500 million or a $500 billion deal with Russia over oil. So it's in their financial interest. So yes, I could see why Russia would actually be very interested in having somebody, hey, we can make deals with, we can, do fossil fuel deals and things like that. Great. He is a more friendly leader. Maybe let's give him a little bit of a push. I don't know. But the whole lesson here is we meddle, they meddle. This isn't a new thing, and they all do it to get an advantage over other countries. It makes sense. So knowing this, of course, we would meddle for our own benefit, and they would meddle for their own benefit. So now the question is, what do we do about it? Well, I think that we make our system better to protect against possible misinformation and meddling. Now, for one, look, if you're worrying about election hacking and penetration into voting systems, well, if you're so worried about it, then you should support, at least on principle, and there are plenty of other better reasons to support it, But I'm just saying, if you're worried about this, well then, okay, hand-counted paper ballots that are accountable, fully accountable, that are, counted by independent election experts to make sure that you can verify everything, that there is a paper trail on your votes. That way you don't have to worry about some, oligarch or whatever coming in and stealing your vote. That would actually make the election system more efficient and more accountable. There were problems with these voting machines being hackable and changeable far before the 2016 election. So let's change it. Let's fix that issue. Let's fix that system. Not only that, but look, as I said, making sure everyone should be able to vote. That's another fix we can make to the system. So that if there is any sort of interference or whatever, that more Americans are involved. That it doesn't allow a small group of people to get swayed by another government or whatever to influence the outcome of the election. So, because that, voter suppression, that I think is the real threat against our democracy, not Russian hacking, which we've had for, again, a long time, which we have also done in other countries. I think the real threat is people being blocked by voter ID laws. Voter suppression is the real way you steal an election. And that's not the fault of the Russians. So let's maybe fix that. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.